Okay, today I'm going to tell you a really interesting story that doesn't have a lot to do with television, but has a little bit to do with journalism and how to talk you into things and how you end up in places. I, for one, ended up living in a Palestinian refugee camp in the Gaza Strip, which is kind of weird for a Jewish kid from New York, but I'm going to tell you how it happened. In the 1970s, that's how old I am, in the late 70s, I went off to Israel with a backpack, like every Jew from New York does for the experience of living in Israel. And like every Jew from New York with a backpack, I ended up working in a kibbutz. This is supposed to be a fantastic experience, working in a kibbutz. It's like a black person coming to the South in the 1820s working in a plantation. It's nothing but slave labor. You end up living in a little shack. They give you some crap clothes to wear, and you work for free, room and board, pretty much 6 days a week. My job was actually picking grapefruits, which in the summertime is like picking cotton. I mean, it's hot, it's unpleasant, it's terrible. And I thought, being, a little Jewish guy from New York, I thought I could pick up some of those cute girls from Denmark and Germany who come to work out their Nazi guilt by finding Jewish guys. But compared to the 6-foot-tall blonde kibbutzniks, I didn't stand a chance. So things were bad, even though I transferred from grapefruits to chickens, 5 in this hand, 4 in this hand. It was terrible. So I quit. I quit the kibbutz, terrible thing to do, and I went off to find something else to do. And what else was there to do? So I had heard about a place called Dahab, which was in the Sinai Peninsula. In those days, the Israelis controlled Sinai. They captured from the Egyptians. And Dahab was kind of today it's a resort that the Egyptians owned, but in those days it was more like Gilligan's Islands. There were a bunch of Bedouin and some huts, and it was sex and drugs and sand and swimming, and that was pretty much it, which sounded good to me. So I went down to Dahab, and I was hanging out, partaking of the sex, drugs, sand, and the swimming, in that order, or maybe not. And I was there for about a month and just hanging out. And it was kind of like Goa in India. It was a hippie crash place in the 70s. And one night, of course, there was nothing else to do but get into discussions. And one night, I got in this big argument with this guy who was on R&R from the Peace Corps. He'd come out of Malawi, about Palestinians. Well, this is Israel in the 70s, and I'm a Jew from New York. And so, I said, Israel must live, Palestinians, blah, 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 Nazis, Germany, Palestinians, Holocaust. That's the normal argument. And I'd been captain of the debate team in high school, so I thought I was pretty good at this. And the guy from Malawi turns to me and he says, your problem, pal, is you never met a Palestinian in your life, which actually turned out to be the truth, because I had never met a Palestinian in my life. So he said to me, you should go to Gaza. And even though I was captain of the debate team, I didn't have much of an answer for that. But I thought, all right, why not? I had all these people wrapped around me, and I thought, all right, I will go to Gaza. We'll see what it's like. So the next day I got on the bus, the Egged bus, leaving Dahab, and I went to Tel Aviv, to the Tourist Information Office, which is in the center on Dizengoff Square. Big, glass, air-conditioned, and I stood on line with everybody else and all the other people online, and finally I get to the desk, and the lady behind the desk to me says, how can I help you? And so I said, I want to go to Gaza. And she looked at me like I said, I want to go to Dachau. So she said, you can't go there. And I said, what do you mean I can't go there? She said, you can't go there. And I said, look at the map behind you. Look over there. See, there's Gaza right there. It's inside Israel. I want to go to Gaza. She says, no, you don't want to go to Gaza. You want to go to kibbutz. And she gave me a brochure. You want to go to kibbutz, but there was no point in hanging out talking to her. So I left, and instead I went down to the coast, right? And I went to, I can't remember the name of the town now, just outside of Gaza. And there was a cement factory there, and they employed Palestinian workers to work in the cement factory. So I hung out in front of the cement factory for 2 or 3 days, and I met some of the Palestinians who were there, who lived in Gaza, and I got friendly with them. And then one day I said, I want to go to Gaza. So they said, okay. So we got in this Arab taxi, and we drove into Gaza. In those days, of course, it was much easier to go because it was still under Israeli control. And they said, where do you want to go? And I said, I don't know. So they dropped me off in the center of Gaza City, and I'm wandering around like this schmuck with a backpack. There are no tourists in Gaza. It's not like going to Jerusalem. And I'm just wandering around, and this guy pulls up in a car. He says, what are you doing here? And I said, I want to look around. He says, you know anyone here? I said, I don't know anybody. So he says, get in the car. Well, today you would think you're going to be kidnapped by terrorists. But in those days, I was a kid with a backpack. What did I know? So I got in the car, and he drove me up to this big house on top of a hill, which was owned by Mrs. Nassar, and she was from the Al-Shawa family. And the Al-Shawa family was one of the old, wealthy families in Gaza from before 1948. And so Alia Shawa, who ran the place, was this matriarch, and she met me, and she never said, "What are you doing here? What do you want here?" And I said, "I just want to look around. I don't really know." It's like the roots of journalism in a funny way. So I said, "I didn't want to look around." So she invited me in, and she gave me a cup of tea, and then she said, "You'll stay here." So for a week, I lived with Mrs. Shawa in Marana House, and there was this butler who served us. It was like something from the Addams Family. I mean, the house was old and shuttered and dark and mysterious, and I didn't know where I was. And she used to say, "You go look around, but come back." So I'd go wander down to Gaza City, and I would come back. And then at the end of a week, she sat me down with a cup of tea, and she says, "Rosenblum, you're a Jew, but I trust you." I said, "Okay." And so then she set me up to live with a family in Gaza Beach Camp, which was one of the refugee camps, and I spent a month living with this family in Gaza Beach Camp in a Palestinian refugee camp, just me, learning, hanging out with them. They're incredibly nice people, incredibly hospitable. But what I really got was I got the Gaza point of view of the Israeli occupation or the state of Israel or whatever it is, which of course vastly different from what I had gotten from a Jew from New York and going to the kibbutz and all this kind of stuff. And so, it began to teach me that there is no objective truth here. There's this perspective and there's that perspective. Everybody's pretty much right from their own point of view. And so from the point of view of somebody who had been born in Gaza or ended up there as a refugee, that's how I began to see the situation. And after a month, my head got really sort of turned around. It would be the beginning of this sense of what I would call trying to look beyond the everyday headlines and what you've been taught as a child. So anyway, I left Gaza after a month, and I went back to Tel Aviv, and I was walking around in Tel Aviv, and there was this sign up on the thing that said there's going to be a big meeting tonight, something to discuss Palestinian issues, all this kind. Of course, it was all Israelis there. So I went to the meeting. Of course, there was one of these guys from Likud going, "Palestinians want to kill us. They just want to destroy us." Any questions? So I raised my hand. I said, "Excuse me, but I've just been in Gaza for a month, and, maybe there's something else to discuss here." And everybody in the room went, "Communist, you're Nazi, you're self-hating Jew," and basically drove me out of the meeting. Well, I mean, that's the end of the story as far as it goes, except a couple of years later when I bought my first video camera. Of course, Gaza is where I went to, and I spent a month again in the same camp with the same people and shot the video and sold the piece to McNeil Lira NewsHour at that time for $50,000, which was pretty good. And that was my first piece as a video journalist working by myself. But I could never have done it if I hadn't had the chutzpah, as we say in Arabic, to go and inject myself into this extremely alien environment. And what I learned from that is what I learned running around the world with a video camera years later, whether I was hanging out with the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, or I was, in Uganda looking for the first AIDS case, or all the stuff I did in video later was that the world is not so frightening as it seems to be, and most people are basically pretty decent if you give them a chance. So that's my lesson for today's story. I hope you enjoyed it.